The USS Defender cut through the Persian Gulf waters with the quiet confidence of American military might, 90,000 tons of naval supremacy. The afternoon sun beat down on the flight deck where sailors moved with practiced precision amid the scream of jet engines. Every motion choreographed, every position calculated, until it wasn't. The first missile streaked across the cloudless sky, a Russian-caliber P-800 Onyx, leaving a trail of white vapor as it bore down on the destroyer. Alarms wailed across the deck. Men scrambled for defensive positions. Incoming bearing 035. The tactical officer's voice cracked over the comm system. Aegis Defense System Failure Manual Override. Itadum. In the weapons control room, Captain James Mitchell froze. The ship's state-of-the-art defense grid flashed red across 6 monitors. His weapons officers hammered at keyboards, desperation evident in their movements. "Sir, targeting systems, non-responsive," Lieutenant Parker shouted. 30 seconds to impact. The ship would be crippled. Hundreds would die. A figure moved silently across the room, a woman in standard-issue work utilities, unremarkable, except for the quiet efficiency of her movements. She was a shadow among the panicked crew, someone whose presence registered only as an obstruction to be avoided. Without a word, she slipped behind the main weapons console, shouldering aside a young ensign. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision, bypassing security protocols that should have taken authorization codes and senior officer clearance. The screens flickered, then stabilized. "What the hell are you, us?" Mitchell began. The woman's voice cut through the chaos level and commanding. "Tomahawk armed, targeting solution acquired." She had already activated what should have been impossible, a manual firing sequence for the ship's primary defense system. "Fire," she said, pressing the launch key. The ship shuddered as the Tomahawk missile erupted from its vertical launch tube, rocketing skyward with a deafening roar. The crew watched in stunned silence as their missile intercepted the incoming threat in a spectacular mid-air explosion that lit up the Gulf sky. In the controlled chaos that followed, the woman's shirt rode up as she leaned across the console to stabilize secondary systems, revealing a latticework of scars across her lower back. Not random injury marks, but the distinctive pattern left by a specific type of proximity, mined the signature of a classified operation that had become the stuff of whispered legend among naval intelligence. Admiral William Hamilton stood in the doorway, his face draining of color as his eyes fixed on those scars. Recognition dawned immediately. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood. He whispered the name, falling from his lips like a ghost story. Operation Kingfish. The woman straightened, turning to face the Admiral with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "You were reported killed in action," Hamilton said, disbelief evident in his voice. 7 years ago." Elena Blackwood's expression remained perfectly neutral, the mask of someone who had spent years disappearing in plain sight. "Sometimes, Admiral," she replied quietly, "that's easier than explaining what really happened." 6 months earlier. Lieutenant Commander Elena Blackwood moved through pre-dawn darkness on the USS Defender's deck, the South China Sea air heavy with salt and tension. Her weathered hands worked efficiently loading Tomahawk missiles onto the launch rack, a task typically assigned to junior personnel. Each BGM-109 Tomahawk weighed nearly 3,500 pounds, with a range of 1,550 miles and a 1,000-pound warhead capable of precision strikes from hundreds of miles away. Elena handled them with methodical precision that suggested years of experience far beyond this menial assignment. The massive weapons slid into place under her guidance, each connection verified with the attention to detail that separated professionals from casualties in combat zones. Her movements were economical, wasting no energy, betraying nothing of the woman behind them. Nearby, a cluster of young officers huddled over steaming coffee cups, their laughter cutting through the morning stillness. "That's her ballast, bitch," Lieutenant Parker said, voice lowered, but still carrying across the deck. "Been here 6 months, barely speaks. Word is she pissed off someone high up in the Pentagon." Lieutenant Jenkins snorted. "Why waste someone with rank on grunt work? Must have really screwed up somewhere." Elena never looked up, seemingly deaf to their comments. As she continued her work, her face remained impassive, eyes focused downward, shoulders slightly hunched, as though carrying an invisible weight. A young crewman hurried past, accidentally bumping into her and causing her to stumble. The Tomahawk shifted precariously. She recovered quickly, steadying the missile with practiced hands. The crewman continued without acknowledging her. She was essentially invisible to the crew, a ghost performing necessary but unappreciated labor. The morning sun crept over the horizon, catching on her hands calloused and strong with a thin white scar running across the right palm. They were not the hands of someone who had spent her career loading ordnance. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the destroyer, Elena returned to her quarters Spartan and impersonal, with a single frame photo turned face down on the small metal desk. A locked footlocker sat untouched under her bunk, a thin layer of dust, suggesting it had not been opened since her arrival. Her uniform jacket hung precisely on a hook, three service ribbons partially hidden in shadow, their colors muted in the dim light. She sat on the edge of her bunk, removed her work gloves, and examined her calloused hands. For a brief moment, something flickered behind her eyes, a glimpse of someone else, someone who had once commanded respect rather than indifference. Then it was gone, replaced by the carefully neutral expression she had perfected over the past 6 months. The ship's intercom crackled. All senior personnel report to the command briefing room at 0800 hours. Elena checked her watch, rose mechanically, and prepared herself for another day of invisibility. Former Colonel James Morrison walked with the measured gait of a man who had spent decades in uniform, though he now wore civilian clothes as the ship's tactical consultant. At 68, his frame remained solid, his posture military straight despite the years. Silver hair cropped close to his skull, eyes that missed nothing, a living relic of America's military campaigns in Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom. He paused on the deck watching Elena work. Unlike the others, his gaze held neither dismissal nor contempt, only careful observation and something resembling recognition. During the weapons systems training session later that morning, Morrison stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, as a junior officer explained the Tomahawk guidance systems to the assembled crew. The presentation was technically accurate, but lacked practical insight. In a combat scenario, the young ensign explained, the targeting system requires 3 minutes for full calibration before deployment. From her position against the wall, Elena's eyes flickered momentarily, a nearly imperceptible reaction. Morrison noticed. When the ensign asked for questions, silence filled the room until Elena spoke, her voice quiet but clear. The Block 4 Tomahawk can actually bypass full calibration in emergency situations, she said. Field Manual TC-31B details the override sequence that reduces deployment time to 47 seconds. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the woman most had never heard speak before. The ensign fumbled through his notes. I don't see that in the standard protocols. She's right, Morrison interjected, stepping forward. It's in the classified supplement. His eyes met Elena's across the room. Good catch, Lieutenant Commander. Later, as the crew dispersed, Morrison approached Elena in the corridor. That's specialized knowledge, he said casually, not something most ordnance officers would know. Elena's posture stiffened slightly. Just following procedure manuals, sir. Morrison studied her face. Funny thing about memories, sometimes they surface at the wrong moment. He paused deliberately. I was at Langley in 2018, April, I believe. Observation Room 3. The color drained from Elena's face, though her expression remained controlled. I don't know what you're talking about, sir, she replied, but her eyes told a different story. Morrison leaned closer. Your secret is safe with me, Commander. Some of us still remember what service really means. He straightened, and some of us know that sometimes the best soldiers are the ones nobody sees. As he walked away, Elena remained frozen in place, the careful facade she had maintained for months, suddenly threatened by a connection to her past she hadn't anticipated. The command briefing room hummed with activity as officers filed in, taking their assigned positions around the tactical display table. Admiral William Hamilton entered, tall and imposing, with silver hair cropped close to his skull. The room snapped to attention. At ease, Hamilton said, his voice carrying natural authority that needed no amplification. Captain Mitchell stood proudly at the Admiral's side as digital maps flickered to life on the main screen, showing their current position and planned route. We are entering a complex tactical environment, Hamilton explained, gesturing to the map where territories claimed by multiple nations overlapped in a web of conflicting colors. Any provocative action could escalate beyond our control. This is a routine exercise on paper, but make no mistake, we are being watched. He tapped a control and a new image appeared, the sleek, predatory silhouette of a Russian Severodvinsk-class submarine. Intelligence reports this beauty has been shadowing our fleet for the past week. The Russians are testing our response patterns. Mitchell nodded gravely. The Defender carries the most advanced weapon systems in the Pacific Fleet. Our response time from threat detection to countermeasure deployment is 90 seconds flat. In the back of the room, Elena attended as the ordnance supervisor standing against the wall, seemingly blending into it. When Mitchell confidently mischaracterized a weapon system's deployment timeframe, her eyes flickered momentarily, a nearly imperceptible reaction. Hamilton's gaze swept the room, pausing briefly as it passed over Elena. Something a flash of recognition quickly suppressed crossed his features before he continued. "Captain Mitchell, I'd like a tour of your missile systems after the briefing," Hamilton said. "I have a particular interest in your Tomahawk capabilities." As the meeting adjourned, officers filed out, returning to their stations with renewed purpose. Morrison watched as Hamilton's eyes followed Elena's departure, the Admiral's expression unreadable. "Interesting briefing," Morrison commented, falling into step beside Hamilton in the corridor. "Standard protocol," Hamilton replied evenly. "That ordnance officer," Morrison said casually. "Blackwood seems to know her systems well." Hamilton's stride faltered almost imperceptibly. "Just doing her job, I imagine." "Funny thing about jobs," Morrison continued. "Sometimes people end up in ones that don't match their qualifications." He paused. "Berlin, 1989. You were there, weren't you, Admiral, during the fall of the wall?" Hamilton's eyes narrowed. "Ancient history, Colonel." "History has a way of repeating itself," Morrison replied, his voice dropping. "Especially the parts we try to bury." Hamilton stopped, turning to face the older man. "Some things are better left buried, Morrison, for everyone's sake." The Admiral's tone carried a warning. "Keep your observations to yourself." As Hamilton walked away, Morrison's weathered face settled into grim determination. He'd recognized something in Elena Blackwood from the moment he'd seen her board the ship 6 months ago. The bearing of a commander trapped in the body of a subordinate, the careful movements of someone accustomed to being watched. And now Hamilton's reaction confirmed his suspicions. Whatever game was being played on the USS Defender, the pieces were far more valuable than anyone was admitting. Lieutenant Brian Hawkins moved through the ship's data center with the focused intensity that had earned him the position of intelligence officer, despite his relative youth. His fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing personnel files that should have been restricted. Blackwood Elena M. Lieutenant Commander, current assignment Ordnance. Supervisor U.S. Defender. Previous assignment Weapons Specialist U.S. Artemis. Hawkins frowned. The USS Artemis had been involved in a classified incident near the Strait of Hormuz 3 years ago, something that had never been fully explained in official channels. He dug deeper, but the file contained only the most basic information, with large sections redacted or simply missing. His search for more information on the Artemis incident yielded little beyond the official statement, a training exercise gone wrong resulting in multiple casualties. The details were classified beyond his clearance level. Later that day, Hawkins approached Morrison in the officer's mess. "Colonel, what do you know about Operation Kingfish?" he asked quietly. Morrison's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "Where did you hear that name?" "Just something I came across in some old files." Hawkins lied smoothly. Morrison studied the younger man. Kingfish wasn't an operation. It was a call sign. He leaned forward. During the late Reagan years, there was a program called Ghost Team Special Units, designed to counter KGB operations without official acknowledgement. If they succeeded, they didn't exist. If they failed, he shrugged, they still didn't exist. And Kingfish, a ghost among ghosts, team leader with an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements. Morrison's eyes grew distant. There were stories of covert extraction in Berlin and impossible rescue in Beirut. Always the same pattern, against orders, against odds, always successful. What happened to this Kingfish? Morrison's expression darkened. Official record says killed in action during a failed operation. But you know what they say about ghosts, sometimes they don't know they're dead. As Hawkins walked away, Morrison watched him thoughtfully. The young intelligence officer was asking dangerous questions. Questions that could unravel carefully constructed narratives and potentially put Elena Blackwood in the crosshairs of people who had gone to great lengths to bury her past. In the weapons control room, Elena recalibrated missile tracking systems. Her hands moved with expertise far beyond her supposed role in putting command sequences with the speed and confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Through the narrow window, she spotted a foreign vessel appearing on the horizon too close for comfort, its silhouette distinctive against the darkening sky. She recognized it instantly, a Russian Udaloy-class destroyer modified with the latest electronic warfare systems. She noticed it before the bridge did, her body tensing instinctively as she recognized the vessel class and its capabilities. Without thinking, she reached for the communication panel, then stopped herself, hand hovering over the alert button. This was not her place anymore. She was ordnance crew, nothing more. Reporting tactical observations would raise questions about how she recognized a military vessel at this distance, how she knew its capabilities without consulting reference materials. She lowered her hand and instead completed her assigned tasks, methodically checking each missile statuses before logging the information and preparing to return to the deck. As she exited the control room, she nearly collided with Lieutenant Hawkins. "Commander Adair," he said, then corrected himself. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, I mean." She kept her eyes lowered, but her posture had suddenly shifted, a reflex from years of command that she couldn't entirely suppress. "There's a vessel approaching from the southwest," Hawkins said, studying her face. "Russian Udaloy-class destroyer. Unusual for them to operate this far from their established patrol routes." It was a test, Elena realized. He was fishing for confirmation that she possessed knowledge beyond her station. "I wouldn't know about patrol routes, sir," she replied carefully. "My concern is ensuring our weapon systems are properly maintained." Hawkins smiled slightly. "Of course, though I didn't specify it was Russian. Interesting that you knew that." Before she could respond, the ship's intercom announced elevated readiness status. All personnel were to prepare for possible engagement scenarios. "Duty calls," Hawkins said, still watching her with newfound interest. "Perhaps we'll continue this conversation later." As he walked away, Elena allowed herself a moment of concern. Lieutenant Hawkins was dangerously perceptive. If he continued digging, he might uncover truths that were better left buried for everyone's sake. By mid-afternoon, 3 Russian vessels had taken position at the edge of international waters, a carefully choreographed display of naval power designed to test American responses without triggering direct confrontation. On the bridge, Captain Mitchell reviewed the situation with his senior officers. "They're testing our resolve," he stated, studying the tactical display where 3 blinking icons represented the foreign ships. "Standard intimidation tactics. Will maintain course and continue our exercises as planned." Lieutenant Hawkins nodded, but his expression revealed concern. "Sir, their positioning suggests coordinated surveillance. The pattern is consistent with pre-engagement protocols we've seen before." Mitchell dismissed the observation. "They're posturing, nothing more." Admiral Hamilton agrees. In the missile bay, Elena worked silently, but her mind processed the tactical situation with the precision of a battlefield commander. The Russian vessels weren't randomly positioned. They were establishing a triangulation pattern used specifically by the former KGB's naval units, designed to channel an enemy vessel toward a predetermined engagement zone. Morrison found her there, his approach deliberately loud enough to announce his presence. "You see it too, don't you?" he asked without preamble. Elena continued her work, not looking up. "See what, sir? The Suvorov Formation, named after Admiral Suvorov, KGB tactical advisor during the Cold War. 3 ships positioned to create a funnel driving the target toward a 4th unseen asset." Morrison leaned against a bulkhead. "I haven't seen that deployment since 1987 off the coast of Cuba." Elena's hands stilled momentarily. "I'm just ordnance crew colonel." "Like hell you are," Morrison replied quietly. "I know what those scars on your back mean. Spetsnaz anti-personnel mine designed for maximum tissue damage with minimal fatality risk. They wanted whoever survived to remember the pain." Elena's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock, and something else, fear perhaps? Or simply the surprise of being truly seen for the first time in years. "How?" "I trained operators for 30 years, Commander. I know what happens when someone like you gets put on ice." Morrison straightened. "Captain Mitchell is a good officer, but he doesn't understand what we're facing. These aren't routine Russian provocations. This is a hunting pattern." "And what exactly do you think they're hunting, Colonel?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Morrison's eyes held hers. Not what commander, who? The ship's alarm system cut through their conversation, a strident pulsing sound that signaled immediate battle stations. Both of them tensed, years of training taking over. Radar contact. The announcement echoed through the ship. Submarine surfacing bearing 270, Russian Severodvinsk class. They're not just watching anymore, Morrison said grimly. They're making a statement. Elena's expression hardened, the mask of indifference slipping to reveal the commander beneath. They're recreating Hormuz, she said quietly. Same tactical approach, same submarine class. How would an ordnance officer know that? Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Elena met his gaze steadily. Because I was there. The tension aboard the USS Defender ratcheted higher as the submarine's conning tower broke the surface water, cascading off its black hull. On the bridge, officers monitored communications, while Captain Mitchell received a secure transmission from Fleet Command. They're jamming our long-range comms, the communications officer reported. Satellite uplink is degraded. We're on our own, sir. Maintain defensive posture, Mitchell ordered. No provocative actions. In the weapons bay, Elena worked frantically to repair a sudden malfunction in the missile loading system, a critical failure that couldn't be coincidental. Her hands moved with practiced urgency, bypassing damaged circuits and rerouting control systems. The hatch opened and Admiral Hamilton entered with Captain Mitchell, their conversation halting abruptly as they noticed her presence. Status report, Mitchell demanded. Almost there, sir, Elena replied, voice strained as she wrestled with a stubborn coupling. Primary launch system compromised, but I can get secondary control online in 3 minutes. As she leaned across the housing to reach a recessed circuit board, her uniform shirt rode up, revealing the latticework of scars across her lower back, distinctive marks that told a story no personnel file ever would. Admiral Hamilton froze color, draining from his face as his eyes fixed on the scarring. Everyone out, he ordered suddenly. Captain Mitchell and I need the room. The technicians filed out, leaving only Elena Hamilton and a confused Mitchell. Sir, Mitchell began. Those scars, Hamilton said quietly, his voice barely audible over the ship's machinery. Operation Kingfish. Elena straightened slowly, wiping grease from her hands with mechanical precision before turning to face them. Gone was the subservient posture, the downcast eyes. She stood at her full height, shoulders square, chin lifted, transformation complete in an instant. Hello, Admiral, she said. Her voice changed, too clear, commanding, no longer muted. You were reported killed in action, Hamilton said, disbelief evident in his tone. Easier than explaining what happened, she replied quietly, for everyone involved. Captain Mitchell looked, bewildered eyes darting between the Admiral and the woman he had barely noticed for 6 months. Sir, I don't understand. Hamilton's demeanor transformed. The stern military man softened, emotion breaking through his professional exterior. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand in a formal salute. Captain Mitchell, he said, voice gaining strength, you have Commander Elena Blackwood on your ship. 7 years ago, she commanded a covert extraction mission in the Strait of Hormuz. When their position was compromised, she used herself as bait to draw enemy fire away from 38 hostages and 14 wounded personnel. Mitchell's eyes widened as Hamilton continued. Her tactical deception enabled the rescue craft to escape. He paused, swallowing hard. The mission remains classified, but the 38 civilians she saved included my daughter. Elena remained stone-faced, her eyes revealing nothing, though something flickered behind them, a shadow of memories better left buried. The Joint Chiefs buried her record after her rescue because her methods violated protocol but saved everyone. They offered her a quiet discharge. She refused, said if she couldn't command, she would serve however she could. Mitchell looked stricken. Why wasn't I informed? Because that was the agreement, Elena finally spoke. I serve. No special treatment, no recognition. The ship suddenly shuddered as something impacted the water nearby. The unmistakable sound of a warning shot, a missile deliberately fired to land short of the vessel. Bridge to Admiral Hamilton, the intercom crackled. Multiple vessels approaching rapidly from the east. Russian communications requesting immediate response. All 3 officers instinctively tensed, years of training taking over. Mitchell moved immediately toward the exit but paused, looking back at Elena with new eyes, truly seeing her for the first time. Commander, he said, the title an acknowledgement of everything he had just learned. Your presence on the bridge would be appreciated. It wasn't an order, but an invitation, a recognition of her expertise and experience. Elena hesitated only briefly before nodding. After you, Captain. As they made their way rapidly through the ship's corridors toward the bridge, crew members pressed themselves against bulkheads to allow them passage, many doing double takes at the sight of the ordinarily invisible ordnance officer striding purposefully alongside the captain and admiral. The ship's alarm systems wailed again as another impact rocked the water nearby, another warning shot. But Elena knew from experience that the third would not miss. They were out of time. Lieutenant Hawkins intercepted them just outside the bridge, his expression grave. "Sir, we've intercepted coded transmissions between the Russian vessels," he reported. "They're using an old KGB frequency rotation we haven't seen since the Cold War." Elena's step faltered. "Echo 7 Tango Protocol." Hawkins looked at her in surprise. "Yes. How did you—" "No time," she cut him off, turning to Hamilton. "Admiral, this isn't a territorial challenge. It's a targeted operation. The submarine, the surface vessels, they're recreating the exact tactical formation from Hormuz." Hamilton's face darkened with understanding. "You think they know you're aboard?" "I think they've always known," Elena replied grimly. "The question is why now?" As they entered the bridge, the tactical display showed the Russian vessels closing in a precisely coordinated pattern. The submarine had fully surfaced, its massive bulk visible on the horizon. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "incoming transmission from the Russian submarine. They're asking for you by name, sir." Mitchell moved to the communications station, but Elena put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "It's not for you," she said quietly. "It's for me." The officer looked confused. "Sir, they specifically asked for the ship's commander." "But play it," Hamilton ordered. The speaker crackled and a heavily accented voice filled the bridge. "USS Defender, this is Captain Petrov of the Russian Federation Navy. We wish to speak with your real commander." A pause. "We wish to speak with Kingfish." The bridge fell silent, all eyes turning to Elena. Her face had gone pale, but her posture remained rigid, controlled. "Petrov," she whispered, the name falling from her lips like a curse. "He was the interrogation specialist. 11 months. Understanding dawned on Mitchell's voice. This woman had endured 11 months of captivity at the hands of the man now controlling the submarine off their starboard bow. "What do they want?" Mitchell asked. "Me," Elena replied simply. "They've always wanted me, or rather what they think I know." Hamilton stepped forward. "Captain Mitchell, as of this moment, Lieutenant Commander Blackwood is reinstated to full tactical command authority on my direct order." Mitchell nodded, then turned to Elena. "Commander, the bridge is yours." As Elena moved to the tactical station, the crew watched in stunned silence as the woman they had dismissed for months took command with the natural authority of someone born to lead. "Weapons status," she ordered, her voice clear and commanding. "Primary missile defense compromised," the tactical officer reported. "Secondary systems online but degraded. Targeting capability at 60%. Elena's fingers flew across the console, inputting commands that bypassed standard protocols. Rerouting targeting through auxiliary systems, bringing countermeasures online. On the main screen, the Russian vessels continued their approach. The submarine launched a signal flare, a brilliant red starburst against the darkening sky. "Their final warning," Elena explained. "Next will be a live missile." She straightened, facing Mitchell and Hamilton. "I need to respond to Petrov. He's following a specific engagement protocol from the old KGB playbook. If I don't answer, he'll interpret it as a refusal to negotiate." "What will you tell him?" Hamilton asked. Elena's eyes hardened. "The truth, that Kingfish died 7 years ago in the Strait of Hormuz." She paused. "But Commander Blackwood is very much alive." As she reached for the communication system, another alarm blared. "Missile launch detected from the Russian submarine. Impact in 45 seconds, the radar operator shouted. Elena's training took over instantly. "Evasive maneuvers, heading 090. Prepare countermeasures." The ship lurched as it began a hard turn away from the incoming threat. "Missile is tracking," the tactical officer reported. "It's locked on our emissions signature." "Shut down main radar," Elena ordered. "Switch to passive systems only." The bridge darkened as primary systems went offline, emergency lighting, casting harsh shadows across tense faces. 30 seconds to impact. Elena moved to the weapons console, hands flying across the controls with practiced precision, preparing manual launch sequence for SM-3 Interceptor. That system's offline, the weapons officer protested. Not anymore, Elena replied, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she implemented bypasses and overrides that shouldn't have been possible without engineering support. The screen flickered, then stabilized, showing a targeting solution. 20 seconds. Launching countermeasures, Elena announced calmly, pressing the firing control. The ship shuddered as the interceptor missile erupted from its launch tube, racing toward the incoming threat. Tracking both missiles, the radar officer reported. Intercept in 10, 9, 8. The bridge crew held their collective breath. 3, 2, 1. A brilliant flash illuminated the horizon as the interceptor collided with the Russian missile, the explosion sending a shockwave across the water that rocked the destroyer. Direct hit, the tactical officer confirmed. Threat neutralized. A moment of stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the steady beep of radar systems tracking the Russian vessels. They're maintaining position, Hawkins reported. No additional launches detected. Elena turned to face Mitchell and Hamilton, her expression grim. That was a demonstration, not an attack. If they wanted to hit us, they would have launched multiple missiles from different vectors. What do they want? Mitchell asked again. Elena's eyes met Hamilton's at a silent communication passing between them. They want what they have always wanted, Whipton. Information I obtained during Operation Kingfish, information they believe I passed to the CIA after my escape. Did you? Mitchell asked. No, Elena replied softly. Because I never had it in the first place. Hamilton stepped forward. Kingfish was a ghost mission completely off the books. Elena's team was sent to extract hostages from a research facility in the Strait of Hormuz. What neither she nor her team knew was that those hostages had been working on a classified project from the Reagan era, something called Blackbird. What's Blackbird? Hawkins asked. That's what they spent 11 months trying to get me to tell them. Elena said, her voice steady despite the weight of the memories. But I couldn't tell them what I didn't know. The communications officer interrupted. Sir, Russian commander requesting direct communication again. Mitchell looked to Elena, who nodded. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled, and the same accented voice filled the room. Impressive shooting, Kingfish. You always were exceptional under pressure. The voice was smooth, almost conversational. Perhaps this is why you survived our conversations. Elena stepped forward, her face a mask of professional control, despite the turmoil that must have raged beneath. This is Commander Elena Blackwood of the United States Navy, she replied, her voice unwavering. State your intentions, Captain Petrov. A low chuckle came through the speakers. After 7 years, you still pretend not to understand. Very well, we will speak plainly. You have something that belongs to us. The Blackbird access codes. I have no such information, Elena responded firmly. Then perhaps we should refresh your memory, Petrov replied. You have 1 hour to surrender yourself to our custody, or we will demonstrate our more persuasive capabilities on your vessel. The communication cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. He's bluffing, Mitchell said, though his voice lacked conviction. No, Elena replied quietly. He's not. The Russians have been developing specialized electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disable electronic systems without causing physical damage. They could cripple the ship without firing a single conventional missile. Hamilton placed a hand on her shoulder. We're not surrendering you, Commander. Not again. Elena looked around the bridge at the crew who just hours before had seen her as nothing more than a failed officer relegated to menial tasks. Now they looked to her as their best hope for survival. Sir, she said, addressing Mitchell directly, request permission to implement countermeasure protocol Echo 7. Mitchell hesitated. I'm not familiar with that protocol. It's not in the standard naval playbook, Elena explained. It's a ghost team tactic designed specifically to counter KGB naval operations. She paused. I wrote it 7 years ago after Hormuz. Morrison, who had entered the bridge silently during the exchange, stepped forward. I've seen it work, Captain, in situations exactly like this one. Mitchell studied Elena's face, measuring the commander against the invisible ordnance officer he thought he'd known. After a moment, he nodded. Make it happen, Commander. As Elena moved to the tactical station and began issuing orders, the transformation was complete. The woman who had loaded missiles in obscurity for 6 months was gone, replaced by the tactical commander she had always been. Hawkins approached her, his expression a mixture of respect and lingering suspicion. "Commander, there's something you should know. We intercepted a transmission from Washington just before the Russians jammed our long-range comms." He handed her a printout, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "It's an order for Captain Mitchell, regarding you." Elena scanned the message, her expression unchanging despite the words printed clearly at the bottom. "Remove LT. Commander Blackwood." Commander Blackwood from all command positions immediately. National Security Directive 2547B. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket, returning her attention to the tactical display without comment. 7 years ago, she had disobeyed a direct order to save 38 lives. The decision had cost her everything, her command, her reputation, very nearly her life. Now, as Russian warships circled and Washington demanded her removal, Commander Elena Blackwood faced the same choice again. The lives of everyone aboard the USS Defender hung in the balance. And once again, she would have to choose between following orders and doing what she knew was right. The USS Defender's command center fell silent as Admiral Hamilton looked at the gathered officers. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Outside, the Russian vessels maintained their menacing formation, a steel trap waiting to spring shut. 7 years ago, Hamilton began, his voice measured and deliberate. Lieutenant Commander Elena Blackwood led a classified extraction mission codenamed Operation Kingfish. The tactical display behind him showed a satellite image of a nondescript facility nestled in the rugged coastline of the Strait of Hormuz. The structure appeared commercial, unremarkable, perfect cover for something meant to remain hidden. 38 American diplomats and intelligence personnel were being held in this facility, Hamilton continued. Intelligence indicated they would be moved within 24 hours to a location beyond our reach. Standard protocol dictated waiting for additional forces a 12-hour delay. Elena stood perfectly still, her face a mask of professional detachment, though her eyes betrayed the weight of memory. Commander Blackwood made the decision to proceed with immediate extraction, using only the resources at her disposal, a 10-person ghost team with limited air support. Captain Mitchell studied Elena with newfound respect. 10 operators against what kind of opposition? Estimated 30 to 40 Russian, special forces, and local militia. Elena answered, her voice steady. The facility was a former oil processing plant retrofitted as a forward intelligence gathering station. Multiple entry points, minimal structural cover. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A suicide mission by any conventional tactical assessment. What Commander Blackwood didn't know, Hamilton continued, was that those hostages were more than diplomats. They were part of a joint intelligence operation investigating the possible resurrection of Project Blackbird, a classified weapons system developed during the Reagan administration. Morrison nodded grimly. Tactical nuclear devices small enough to be transported in a diplomatic pouch. The ultimate deniable weapon. The mission succeeded, Hamilton said, his voice softening. All 38 hostages were extracted. But Commander Blackwood's team was ambushed during the final evacuation. She ordered the rescue helicopters to depart with the hostages, while she and 3 operators provided covering fire. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They were presumed killed in action, Hamilton finished, until Commander Blackwood reappeared 11 months later at a CIA extraction point in Turkey, the sole survivor. The unspoken question hung in the air, finally voiced by Hawkins. What happened during those 11 months? Commander Elena met his gaze directly. I was held at a black site facility run by the FSB, formerly the KGB. Captain Petrov was my primary interrogator. Her voice remained clinical, detached, as though describing events that had happened to someone else. They believed I had access to information about Project Blackbird during the extraction. They wanted the access codes, deployment protocols, anything I might have seen or heard. She paused. They were thorough in their methods. Hamilton stepped forward. What Commander Blackwood endured would have broken most operatives within days. She held out for 11 months without revealing a single piece of actionable intelligence. The Admiral's eyes met Elena's. Among the hostages was my daughter, Julia Hamilton, a CIA field officer embedded with the diplomatic team. Commander Blackwood saved her life along with 37 others. Mitchell looked stricken. Why wasn't this recognized? Why was she? He gestured helplessly at Elena's ordnance uniform. Hamilton's expression darkened. Politics, Captain. The operation violated direct orders. Regardless of its success, such actions couldn't be officially sanctioned. There were those in Washington who wanted her court-martialed. So they buried her instead, Mitchell concluded, anger evident in his voice. The Joint Chiefs offered a discharge with full benefits, Elena said quietly. I declined. Why? Mitchell asked, genuinely puzzled. After such treatment, why continue to serve? For the first time, emotion flickered across Elena's face, a brief glimpse of the passion that drove her. Because this is who I am, she said simply. If I couldn't serve as a commander, I would serve in whatever capacity was permitted. The ship's intercom interrupted the moment. Bridge to Captain Mitchell. Russian vessels are changing formation. Request your presence immediately, sir. Come with me, Commander, Mitchell said to Elena. No longer a request, but an acknowledgement of her rightful place. Let's see what Petrov is planning. On the bridge, the tactical display showed the Russian vessels shifting position, spreading out to maintain visual contact with the USS Defender from multiple angles. They're channeling us, Elena said, immediately studying the pattern, creating a corridor that forces us either toward their territorial waters or into this navigational choke point. Her finger traced across the screen. Classic Suvorov maneuver. Mitchell frowned. How can you be certain? Because I've seen this before, she replied. It's the same flanking technique used in the Hormuz incident. They don't want direct confrontation. They want to force us into a position where we have no good options, where any action we take can be portrayed as aggression. The bridge fell silent as her words sank in. Even those who had no knowledge of Operation Kingfish could sense the weight of experience behind her assessment. Mitchell studied the display again, seeing it now through the lens of her explanation. The pattern became clear, a subtle but deliberate manipulation of their available navigation options. What do you recommend? He asked the question, a tacit acknowledgement of her expertise. For a brief moment, Elena seemed surprised by the request, as though she had become so accustomed to being ignored that being consulted felt alien. Then her training took over, the commander she had once been emerging fully from, beneath the carefully constructed facade of the past 6 months. We adjust course 15 degrees starboard, but make it appear as though we're maintaining current trajectory. Simultaneously, we initiate a false communications burst, suggesting we're calling for reinforcements. Her hands move confidently across the tactical display. They'll read the signal, even through the jamming. Then we deploy passive sonar buoys here and here, creating the impression we're establishing a defensive perimeter. She looked up, meeting Mitchell's eyes directly. They believe they have the advantage because they think we don't see their strategy. We turn that against them. Mitchell considered her proposal. It was unorthodox, deceptive, rather than directly confrontational, but it addressed the true nature of the threat they faced. After a moment, he nodded. Make it happen, he ordered. The bridge erupted into coordinated activity as Mitchell relayed the plan to his officers. Elena stepped back, watching as her strategy was implemented, her expression betraying nothing of what she must be feeling at this unexpected return to the role she had thought forever lost to her. Admiral Hamilton moved to stand beside her, speaking quietly so only she could hear. You never stopped being a commander, did you? Even loading missiles in obscurity, you were still analyzing, strategizing, preparing. She met his gaze steadily. Some things become part of who you are. They cannot be taken away, only hidden. He nodded, understanding. When this is over, we need to talk about your future. The agreement may have satisfied the Joint Chiefs, but it has deprived the Navy of one of its finest tactical minds. That ends today. Before she could respond, Lieutenant Hawkins called out from his station. Sir, the vessels are altering course. They appear to be reassessing their approach. In the dimly lit confines of the secure communications room, Truman Wallace, the ship's senior intelligence officer, hunched over an encrypted terminal. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, composing a message that would never appear in the official logs. Asset Kingfish compromised. Repeat, Asset Kingfish compromised. Blackbird protocols potentially exposed. Awaiting instructions. He encrypted the message using a classification code that bypassed normal naval communications channels, routing it directly to a special unit within naval intelligence. A unit whose existence was known to only a handful of people outside the Pentagon. The response came almost immediately. Remove Kingfish from command immediately. Contain all information regarding Blackbird. Authorization code, November Echo Delta 47392. Wallace deleted both messages, his weathered face settling into grim determination. 25 years in naval intelligence had taught him that some secrets were worth preserving at any cost, even if that cost was a decorated officer's career or life. He made his way to the bridge, the authorization code memorized, prepared to deliver the directive to Captain Mitchell. What happened after that would depend on how cooperative Commander Blackwood proved to be. The bridge of the USS Defender hummed with renewed purpose as Elena's strategy unfolded. The false communications burst had been transmitted. The passive sonar buoys deployed in a pattern suggesting defensive preparations. Now they waited, every officer intent on their instruments, monitoring the approaching vessels for any change in behavior. "They're slowing," Lieutenant Hawkins reported, his voice calm but edged with tension. "Lead vessel is adjusting course 2 degrees north." Mitchell nodded, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Continue as planned. Maintain our adjusted heading, but keep the appearance of our original course." Elena stood slightly apart, her posture that of an observer rather than a participant. Yet her presence had subtly altered the dynamics of the bridge. Officers occasionally glanced her way, as though seeking confirmation or approval of their actions. "Second vessel is altering course as well," Hawkins continued. "They appear to be reassessing their approach." Admiral Hamilton, who had remained silent throughout the implementation of Elena's plan, now moved to stand beside Mitchell. "They detected our communication burst," he observed. "As intended," Mitchell confirmed. Commander Blackwood predicted they would interpret it as a call for reinforcements. The use of her proper rank was not lost on the bridge crew. Whispers had already begun to circulate through the ship, fragments of information about Operation Kingfish, about the woman who had spent months loading missiles in obscurity while possessing tactical expertise that might now save them all. "All 3 vessels are now adjusting course," Hawkins reported. "They're breaking formation, moving to establish a wider perimeter." Elena took a step forward, studying the display intently. "They believe we're aware of their intentions. They're reassessing." For several tense minutes, the bridge remained silent, except for the necessary communications between officers manning their stations. Then gradually the pattern on the tactical display began to change. "Lead vessel is increasing distance," Hawkins said. "Second and third are following suit. They're withdrawing to beyond the 12-mile limit." A collective release of breaths swept through the bridge, not quite relief, but the easing of immediate tension. "They're saving face," Elena explained quietly, "maintaining the fiction that this was merely a routine patrol that happened to cross our path. They won't risk confrontation if they believe reinforcements are en route." Mitchell turned to her, his expression a mixture of respect and lingering disbelief. "Your assessment was accurate in every detail." She acknowledged his words with a slight nod, her demeanor still reserved despite the validation of her expertise. Years of practiced invisibility were not easily discarded. "Stand down from heightened alert," Mitchell ordered. "Maintain standard surveillance protocols. I want hourly reports on the positions of those vessels." As the bridge crew returned to normal operations, the door slid open to admit Commander Wallace. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of Elena standing at the tactical station, but he quickly composed his features into professional neutrality. "Captain Mitchell," he said formally. "A word in private, sir. It's a matter of some urgency." Mitchell nodded. "Admiral Hamilton, Commander Blackwood, join us in the briefing room." Wallace's expression tightened. "Sir, this is a classified intelligence matter that requires the input of my tactical executive officer." Mitchell interrupted firmly, using a title that formalized Elena's new position. "And Admiral Hamilton has the highest possible security clearance. They're coming, Commander." Wallace had no choice but to acquiesce, though his rigid posture betrayed his displeasure as the 4 officers made their way to the adjacent briefing room. Once the door closed behind them, Wallace produced a printed directive and placed it on the table. "Captain, I've received direct orders from Naval Intelligence Division regarding Commander Blackwood." He emphasized her rank with subtle distaste. "She is to be removed from all command functions immediately and confined to quarters pending extraction at our next port of call." Mitchell stared at the paper, then at Wallace. "On what grounds?" "National security, sir." Wallace's eyes flickered to Elena. "Commander Blackwood's presence on this vessel represents a significant security breach. The details are classified beyond your need to know." Hamilton stepped forward, his admiral's insignia catching the light. I think you'll find, Commander Wallace, that very little in this Navy is classified beyond my need to know. Wallace remained impassive. With respect, Admiral, these orders come directly from SpecCom Division at the Pentagon. Even your authority is superseded in this matter. Elena had remained silent, studying Wallace with the careful assessment of someone who had learned to read people's true intentions through years of high-stakes operations. This isn't about security, she said finally. It's about Blackbird. Wallace's composure slipped for just an instant, a fractional widening of the eyes that confirmed her suspicion. I have no knowledge of any operation or project with that designation, he replied stiffly. Interesting, Elena said softly. I never said it was an operation or project. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Wallace had revealed knowledge he shouldn't possess, knowledge that connected him to whatever Elena had unknowingly discovered during the Kingfish operation. Mitchell looked between them, then made his decision. Commander Wallace, I'm going to need verification of these orders through official channels before taking any action. Sir, our long-range communications are still being jammed by the Russians, Wallace protested. How convenient, Hamilton observed dryly. Then we'll wait until communications are restored, Mitchell replied. Until then, Commander Blackwood remains my tactical executive officer. That will be all, Commander Wallace. Wallace's face flushed with barely contained anger, but he offered a stiff salute before departing. The moment the door closed behind him, Mitchell turned to Elena. What the hell is going on, Commander? What is Blackbird, and why is Wallace so determined to remove you from the equation? Elena exchanged a glance with Hamilton. Blackbird was supposedly decommissioned in '91 at the end of the Cold War. It was a tactical nuclear weapons program designed to place small, untraceable devices in strategic locations worldwide, a doomsday insurance policy. The Joint Chiefs ordered the program terminated and all devices recalled, Hamilton added. But there were always rumors that not all the weapons were accounted for. And you think Wallace is connected to this, Mitchell asked. I think Wallace is working for someone who believes I obtained information about Blackbird during the Hormuz extraction, Elena replied. Information that could potentially expose a decades-old conspiracy within our own military. The intercom interrupted their conversation. Bridge to Captain Mitchell. The Russian submarine is on the move, sir. Heading directly for our position at flank speed. The three officers exchanged grim looks before rushing back to the bridge. Whatever Wallace's agenda, it would have to wait. The more immediate threat was bearing down on them at 40 knots. Colonel James Morrison found Elena alone in the weapons control room an hour later, recalibrating targeting systems with the focused precision that had become her trademark. They're calling you the Ghost Commander, he said by way of greeting. Word spreads fast on a warship. Elena didn't look up from her work. Ghosts should remain invisible, Colonel. This attention's unwelcome. Morrison closed the door, engaging the privacy lock, an unusual action that finally drew her full attention. There's something you need to know, he said, his voice dropping. Something about Wallace and about Hamilton. Elena's hands stilled on the control panel. I'm listening. I've known about you since Hormuz, Morrison admitted. I was part of the extraction team that pulled you out of Turkey. Half dead, still refusing to talk even to our own people until we provided the proper authentication codes. Surprise registered briefly in her eyes. You weren't on the manifest. Because officially I wasn't there. Morrison leaned closer. I was consulting for a special division within the CIA, a division that had been monitoring Blackbird since its inception. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to understand what you're really dealing with. Morrison's weathered face was grave. When you rescued those hostages, you unknowingly interrupted a much larger operation. Those weren't just diplomats or intelligence officers. They were the original Blackbird scientists and handlers, people who knew every access code, every deployment location. Elena processed this information with the rapid analysis of a battlefield commander. And the Russians wanted that information. Not the Russians, Morrison corrected, at least not officially. What you encountered was a rogue faction, former KGB officers who had gone private after the Soviet collapse, selling their services to the highest bidder. Petrov, Elena said the name like ash in her mouth. Morrison nodded. Petrov was their interrogation specialist, but he wasn't working for Moscow. He was working for someone much closer to home. The implication hung in the air between them. You're suggesting there's a faction within our own military that wants the Blackbird weapons, Elena said carefully. I'm not suggesting it, Commander. I'm confirming it. Morrison's eyes held hers, and Admiral Hamilton is involved up to his neck. Elena's expression hardened. That's not possible. His daughter was among the hostages. I saved her life. Did you, Morrison asked quietly, did you ever actually see Julia Hamilton during the extraction, ever speak to her directly? The question struck Elena like a physical blow. She had been so focused on the tactical aspects of the mission, moving hostages in groups maintaining security. Had she ever specifically identified Julia Hamilton? The extraction was chaotic, she admitted. We moved 38 people under fire. I had visual confirmation of all hostages from the intelligence briefing photos, but you never specifically checked that Julia Hamilton was among them. Morrison finished for her. Because why would you? The mission was a success. All hostages accounted for. Elena's tactical mind raced ahead, connecting dots she had never thought to connect before. You're saying Julia Hamilton wasn't there, that she was never a hostage. I'm saying Julia Hamilton doesn't exist, Morrison corrected. She's a fiction created to give Hamilton a personal stake in the mission, a reason to push for immediate extraction rather than waiting for proper backup. He needed someone on the ground who would act decisively, someone whose judgment wouldn't be clouded by politics or protocol. He needed me, Elena whispered, understanding dawning like a cold sun. He manipulated me into launching an unauthorized extraction. Because he knew you would succeed where others might fail, Morrison confirmed. And in the chaos, no one would notice if certain items or information disappeared, things related to Blackbird. Elena's mind was racing now, reassessing every aspect of the Hormuz operation through this new lens. But why reveal himself now? Why expose his connection to me on this ship? Because whatever he was looking for 7 years ago, he didn't find it, Morrison replied. And he believes you have it or know where it is. The Russians showing up isn't a coincidence, Commander. This is a coordinated operation to extract whatever you supposedly know about Blackbird. The weapons control room suddenly felt too small. The air too thin. Elena had spent 7 years believing she had sacrificed her career to save innocent lives, only to discover she had been a pawn in a game she hadn't even known was being played. Wallace is Hamilton's man, she concluded. Has been for years, Morrison confirmed. Part of a shadow network within naval intelligence dedicated to locating and controlling the remaining Blackbird devices. Elena's training took over, pushing personal feelings aside to focus on the tactical situation. Why are you telling me this? Why not, Morrison's expression softened slightly. Because 7 years ago, I watched you make the right choice when following orders would have been easier. I watched you prioritize human lives over politics. I watched you endure 11 months of hell rather than compromise your principles. He straightened to his full height, the bearing of a career soldier who had seen too much but still believed in the oath he had taken. And because someone needs to stand against what Hamilton and his people are planning, someone with a tactical mind and moral compass to stop them. His eyes held hers. Someone like you, Commander. Before Elena could respond, the ship's alarm system activated. Not the urgent battle station's klaxon, but the steady pulse that indicated incoming communication. The Russians are making contact again, Elena realized. Morrison nodded grimly. It's all coming to a head now. Whatever you decide to do, Commander, remember nothing is as it appears. Trust your instincts, not your orders. As Elena hurried toward the bridge, her mind processed this new information with the disciplined analysis that had once made her one of the Navy's finest tactical commanders. If Morrison was right, she wasn't just facing the Russians or Wallace. She was caught in a decades-old conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of military command. And somehow, unknowingly, she held the key to whatever they were all seeking. On the bridge, tension had ratcheted to a near breaking point. The Russian submarine had taken position directly in the USS Defender's path, its massive black hull breaching the surface in an unmistakable blockade. The 2 escort vessels had returned, positioning themselves to cut off any evasive maneuvers. They're demanding direct communication with Commander Blackwood, Mitchell informed her as she entered. Captain Petrov is becoming insistent. Elena noted Wallace standing near the communication station, his posture, rigid eyes following her every move. Hamilton stood by the tactical display, outwardly calm, but with a subtle tension in his shoulders that she now recognized as calculation rather than concern. "Put him through," she said, moving to the command station. The main screen flickered, revealing the interior of the Russian submarine's control room. In the center stood Captain Petrov, a tall, lean man with steel-gray hair and the cold eyes of a predator. His face bore the distinctive scar of a knife wound across his left cheek, a souvenir from some long-ago encounter. "Commander Blackwood," he said, his accent precise and cultured. "How good to see you again. You are looking well for someone who endured such intensive hospitality." Elena's expression remained perfectly neutral, betraying none of the visceral reaction his voice triggered. Memories of pain, of darkness, of endless questioning. "State your purpose, Captain Petrov," she replied evenly. "Your vessels are in violation of international waters and are directly impeding a United States naval vessel." Petrov smiled thinly. "Always so formal, Commander." "Very well. My purpose is simple: to complete the conversation we began 7 years ago. The one about Blackbird." From the corner of her eye, Elena saw Wallace stiffen, while Hamilton remained carefully impassive. "I have nothing to tell you about any project with that name," she responded, the denial automatic after years of repetition. "Perhaps not consciously," Petrov conceded. "But we both know the human mind preserves information in many ways, some beyond our conscious access." His smile widened slightly. "I have specialists aboard who are eager to continue our exploration of your particular memory architecture." Mitchell stepped forward, anger evident in his bearing. "That sounds remarkably like a threat against a United States naval officer, Captain." "Merely a professional invitation," Petrov replied smoothly. "Commander Blackwood possesses information vital to Russian national security, information obtained during an illegal incursion into a Russian protected facility." "The facility was on Iranian soil," Elena countered, "and the personnel being held were American citizens under diplomatic protection." "Details," Petrov dismissed with a wave. "What matters is that during your visit you accessed secure terminals containing classified information. Whether you remember it or not is irrelevant. The information is there in your remarkable mind." Hamilton finally spoke, his voice carrying the full weight of his rank. "Captain Petrov, whatever grievance you believe you have with Commander Blackwood, this is neither the time nor the place to address it. Withdraw your vessels immediately or face the consequences of threatening a United States warship." Petrov's eyes shifted to Hamilton, something like amusement flickering across his features. "Admiral Hamilton, how interesting to find you aboard. One might almost suspect coordination." The implication hung in the air, a deadly accusation that caused several bridge officers to glance uncertainly at their admiral. "You have 1 hour to deliver Commander Blackwood to my vessel," Petrov continued, ignoring the rising tension. "After that, we will be forced to take more direct action." His eyes returned to Elena. "1 hour, Commander, for old time's sake." The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Mitchell was the first to speak. "We're not surrendering anyone to the Russians. Especially not you, Commander." "Of course not," Hamilton agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly. "We need to contact the fleet, request immediate reinforcement." "Communications are still being jammed," Hawkins reported from his station. "We're on our own, sir." Elena studied the tactical display, mind racing through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes with the precision that had once made her ghost team legendary. "They're bluffing," she said finally. "Petrov knows the political cost of firing on a U.S. warship would be too high. This is psychological warfare, his specialty." "I wouldn't be so certain," Wallace interjected. "Our intelligence suggests the Russians have been testing a new class of electromagnetic pulse weapon capable of disabling our electronics without causing physical damage. They could effectively cripple this ship without firing a conventional shot." Elena noted the precision of his intelligence, too specific, too convenient. Another piece of the puzzle Morrison had outlined. "Commander Wallace is right," Hamilton said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We can't risk the entire ship. Perhaps there's a third option." He turned to Elena. "A temporary exchange. You go aboard their vessel under strict protocols with continuous communication and a security detail standing by." Mitchell looked stunned. "Admiral, with all due respect, that's completely out of the question. We don't surrender our people. Ever." "It wouldn't be surrender," Hamilton argued. It would be a tactical pause, buying time while we attempt to restore communications with the fleet. But Elena watched this exchange with new understanding. Hamilton wasn't simply making a tactical suggestion, he was maneuvering her exactly where Petrov wanted her, where they both wanted her. Captain Mitchell is right, she said firmly. We don't negotiate with threats, and we certainly don't send American officers into Russian custody. Hamilton's expression hardened slightly. This is a direct order, Commander. Prepare for transfer to the Russian vessel. The bridge fell silent, the standoff between Admiral and Commander creating a tension that crackled like electricity. Mitchell stepped forward. Admiral Hamilton, I must respectfully remind you that as captain of this vessel, the safety of my crew is my primary responsibility. I cannot and will not order Commander Blackwood to surrender to the Russians. This isn't your decision, Captain, Hamilton replied coldly. This is a matter of national security that supersedes normal chain of command. Wallace moved to stand beside Hamilton, his hand resting meaningfully on his sidearm. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. The situation was rapidly approaching a breaking point. Elena assessed the tactical situation with the cool detachment that had kept her alive through countless operations. The bridge crew were watching, uncertain where their loyalties should lie in this unprecedented confrontation between their captain and an admiral. Most would follow Mitchell, but Wallace likely had loyalists of his own positioned throughout the ship. Gentlemen, she said, her voice cutting through the tension, perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. The bridge crew has duties to attend to. Mitchell recognized her strategy immediately, diffusing the immediate confrontation while buying time to develop a plan. Agreed. Admiral Hamilton, Commander Wallace will resolve this in the briefing room. Lieutenant Hawkins, you have the bridge. As they moved toward the exit, Elena caught Morrison's eye across the room. The old colonel gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever happened next, she would not be facing it alone. The moment the briefing room door closed behind them, Hamilton dropped all pretense. You've become a liability, Commander. You always were too damn stubborn for your own good. Like when I believed I was rescuing your daughter, Elena replied, the edge in her voice razor sharp. Interesting how Julia Hamilton never seems to be available for family reunions. Hamilton's eyes narrowed. Morrison, he concluded, always sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. What exactly are you after, Admiral? Mitchell demanded. What is Blackbird, and why are you working with the Russians to get it? I'm not working with the Russians, Captain, Hamilton corrected. I'm working with certain elements who understand the strategic necessity of retrieving the Blackbird devices before they fall into the wrong hands. Elements like Captain Petrov, Elena asked, a former KGB interrogation specialist now working as a private contractor. Petrov goes where the money is, Hamilton acknowledged. 7 years ago, he was contracted to extract information from you, information about the access codes you unwittingly memorized while accessing the central terminal during the Hormuz extraction. Elena's mind flashed back to that night, the frantic evacuation the moment she had used a terminal to override the facility's security systems. She had seen something, a string of characters that had registered only subconsciously. The terminal displayed the Blackbird access codes, she realized, but I never consciously processed them. Exactly, Hamilton confirmed, but they're there buried in your subconscious. Petrov's specialists have developed techniques to extract such information, unpleasant but effective. You set me up, Elena said, the truth finally crystallizing. The entire Hormuz operation was designed to get someone inside that facility to access those terminals. We needed those codes, Hamilton replied unapologetically. The Blackbird devices are still out there, Commander. 30 tactical nuclear weapons hidden in strategic locations around the world. The Russians have been hunting them for years, if they find even one before we do. So you sacrificed my team, Elena said, her voice dangerously quiet. You sent us in without proper backup, knowing the odds, because you needed someone to access that terminal. I selected you because you were the best, Hamilton countered. Because I knew if anyone could pull it off, it would be Kingfish and her ghost team. And I was right, you got the hostages out. While losing my entire team, Elena finished. Convenient how that worked out. Wallace stepped forward, impatience evident in his bearing. This history lesson is fascinating, but we have more immediate concerns. The Russians want Blackwood, and one way or another, they're going to get her. Mitchell moved to stand beside Elena, his position making his allegiance clear. They'll have to go through me first. Don't be dramatic, Captain, Hamilton said dismissively. No one wants unnecessary casualties. Commander Blackwood will accompany us to the Russian vessel, where specialists will extract the Blackbird codes. Once that's done, she'll be returned unharmed. Like last time, Elena asked quietly. 11 months of unharmed extraction techniques. That was unfortunate, Hamilton acknowledged without a trace of genuine regret. Petrov exceeded his mandate. This time the procedure will be quick and controlled. Mitchell's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. This isn't happening, Admiral. Not on my ship. Wallace drew his weapon with practiced speed, training it on Mitchell. Don't make this worse than it needs to be, Captain. The standoff had reached its breaking point at Admiral, against Captain Intelligence Officer, against Commander with Elena, at the center of a conspiracy 7 years in the making. The ship's alarm system shattered the moment the urgent klaxon signaling imminent threat. The intercom crackled. Captain, to the bridge, Russian vessels are launching missiles. The 4 officers froze, then moved as one toward the door, momentary enemies united by the greater threat to their ship and crew. As they raced back to the bridge, Elena's mind shifted into the combat mode that had once made her legend among ghost teams. Whatever Hamilton's agenda, whatever secrets she might unknowingly hold, the immediate priority was clear: saving the USS Defender and her crew from the missiles now streaking toward them. The personal reckonings would have to wait. War had come to the South China Sea, and Commander Elena Blackwood was about to demonstrate why she had once been called the finest tactical mind in the Navy. The bridge door slid open, revealing a tactical display awash in red as multiple missile tracks converged on their position. Impact in 60 seconds, Hawkins reported tensely. Aegis defense system still compromised. Elena moved to the weapons console without hesitation, shouldering aside the young officer stationed there. Her fingers flew across the controls, bypassing safety protocols, accessing systems that should have been locked behind multiple authorization codes. Commander Blackwood is relieved of duty, Hamilton announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. This is a direct order. Remove her from that console immediately. The bridge crew hesitated, caught between conflicting authorities as the missile tracks grew ever closer on the tactical display. Mitchell made his decision. Belay that order. Commander Blackwood has the con. All personnel will follow her instructions without question. He turned to Hamilton, his expression resolute. Admiral, with all due respect on this ship, my word is final. Elena didn't look up, her focus absolute as she reconfigured the ship's defensive systems. Rerouting power to secondary targeting array, activating manual intercept protocol. The seconds ticked down as she worked, the fate of everyone aboard hanging in the balance. Missiles at 30 seconds to impact. Hawkins reported, his voice steady despite the imminent threat. On the main screen, the Russian submarine remained on the surface, its presence a dark promise of further escalation. Elena completed her adjustments, then looked up at Mitchell. Captain, I need your authorization code to unlock the emergency defense protocol. Mitchell didn't hesitate. Authorization Mitchell Alpha 79 Tango. As Elena entered the code, Hamilton stepped forward. Captain Mitchell, you are hereby relieved of command for insubordination during combat operations. Mitchell didn't flinch. Noted, Admiral. We can discuss my court-martial after we survive the next 30 seconds. Elena activated the modified defense system, her movements precise despite the pressure. Countermeasures deployed. Brace for possible impact. The bridge crew held their collective breath as the tactical display showed their hastily deployed countermeasures racing to intercept the incoming missiles. 10 seconds to impact. Hawkins counted down. 5, 4, 3. The main screen lit up with a series of brilliant flashes as the countermeasures connected with their targets, detonating the Russian missiles safely away from the ship. All missiles neutralized, Hawkins confirmed, relief evident in his voice. No damage to the vessel. A moment of stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken by Mitchell's steady voice. Maintain battle stations. This isn't over. On the tactical display, the Russian vessels remained in position, neither advancing nor retreating, a silent challenge still to be answered. Elena straightened from the console, turning to face Hamilton and Wallace. The bridge crew watched, the air thick with tension as the command structure of their vessel fractured before their eyes. Admiral Hamilton, she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the bridge. I believe it's time we finished our conversation about Blackbird and about what really happened 7 years ago in the Strait of Hormuz. Hamilton's face hardened, his eyes cold as Arctic ice. You are making a serious mistake, Commander. No, Elena replied with quiet certainty. For the first time in 7 years, I'm finally seeing things clearly. She turned to Mitchell. Captain, I recommend we prepare for a potential boarding action. The Russians won't give up easily, and neither will those within our own ranks who want the Blackbird codes. Mitchell nodded in understanding the subtle warning. Agreed, Commander. Lieutenant Parker, secure all sensitive areas of the ship. Lieutenant Jenkins, prepare a security detail. No one moves through this vessel without proper authorization. As the officers rushed to comply, Elena returned her attention to the tactical display, studying the Russian vessels with the eyes of someone who had faced them before and survived. They'll try again, she said quietly to Mitchell, and next time they won't use conventional weapons. What are we facing, Commander? He asked equally low. The weapon Wallace mentioned, the electromagnetic pulse device. It's real, and if they deploy it, we'll lose all electronic systems. Her eyes met his, and then they'll board us. Mitchell absorbed this information with the calm of a seasoned commander. Recommendations. Elena's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes. We need to strike first, disable the submarine before they can deploy the EMP weapon. That would be an act of war, Hamilton interjected, having overheard their conversation. As opposed to firing missiles at a U.S. warship, Mitchell countered. I think that line has already been crossed, Admiral. The tactical situation had reached a critical juncture, the USS Defender caught between Russian aggression from without and betrayal from within. And at the center stood Commander Elena Blackwood, a woman who had spent 7 years in the shadows, now thrust back into the light at the moment of greatest danger. The next move would determine not just the fate of the ship and her crew, but potentially the future of a weapons system so secret that nations would kill to control it. Elena met Hamilton's cold stare across the bridge, the weight of 7 years of deception and manipulation crystallizing into a single moment of clarity. I never forgot what you taught me at the Academy, Admiral, she said, her voice carrying in the hushed bridge. Always control the battlefield. Never let your enemy dictate the terms of engagement. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Hamilton's face. And right now, Elena continued, you're not controlling anything, not this ship, not the Russians, and certainly not me. She turned back to the tactical display, her mind already formulating the counterstrike that would either save the USS Defender or initiate a conflict with consequences no one could predict. The final confrontation was approaching, and Commander Elena Blackwood, the ghost of Operation Kingfish, was finally ready to face it on her own terms. The bridge of the USS Defender had transformed into a silent battlefield. No shots fired, no blood spilled, but the lines were clearly drawn. On one side stood Captain Mitchell, Commander Blackwood, and the majority of the bridge crew. On the other, Admiral Hamilton and Commander Wallace, their authority undermined, but their threat still very real. Captain Mitchell, Hamilton said, his voice tight with controlled anger, I am giving you one final opportunity to follow direct orders from a superior officer. Surrender Commander Blackwood to my custody immediately. Mitchell stood his ground, shoulders square, chin lifted in defiance. With all due respect, Admiral, I believe your orders are compromised by personal interests that may run counter to the security of this vessel and the United States Navy. That's mutiny, Captain, Wallace warned, his hand still resting on his holstered sidearm. No, Mitchell countered, it's judgment. The kind of judgment we're expected to exercise when the chain of command is compromised. He turned to Hamilton. Admiral, you've admitted to manipulating a covert operation for purposes you've yet to fully disclose. You've collaborated with a known Russian operative, and now you're attempting to surrender an American officer to foreign custody. The bridge crew watched this unprecedented confrontation in stunned silence. For most, this was a scenario no training had prepared them for. Senior officers in open conflict, the very structure of military authority fracturing before their eyes. Elena stepped forward, her bearing carrying the natural authority that had once made her the most respected ghost team commander in the service. Admiral Hamilton, I think it's time we had that discussion about Blackbird. The full discussion with everyone present. Hamilton's eyes narrowed, calculating his options. The tactical display behind him showed the Russian vessels maintaining their position, a silent waiting threat. This isn't the time or place, Commander, he replied coldly. I disagree, Elena said, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. For 7 years, I've carried the weight of Operation Kingfish. I've loaded missiles and scrubbed decks while believing I'd sacrificed my career to save 38 innocent lives. Her eyes locked with Hamilton's. But that was never the whole truth, was it? She turned to address the bridge crew directly. 7 years ago, I led a ghost team into a Russian-controlled facility in the Strait of Hormuz. We were told 38 American diplomats and intelligence officers were being held hostage, including Admiral Hamilton's daughter. The crew listened rapt as the classified history unfolded before them. The mission succeeded, but at a terrible cost. My entire team was lost, or so everyone believed. I was captured and held for 11 months by the man currently commanding that submarine. She gestured toward the tactical display. Captain Petrov specializes in information extraction. He spent those 11 months trying to get me to reveal what I knew about something called Project Blackbird. Hamilton stepped forward, voice sharp with warning. Commander, you are disclosing classified information to personnel without clearance. They're about to die for that information, Admiral, Elena countered. I think that earns them clearance. She continued unflinching. Project Blackbird was a Cold War program, tactical nuclear devices small enough to be hidden in diplomatic pouches, designed as a doomsday insurance policy. Officially decommissioned in 1991, but apparently not all the weapons were accounted for. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. During the Hormuz extraction, I accessed a terminal to override security protocols. That terminal displayed Blackbird access codes, information I saw but didn't consciously process. Elena's gaze returned to Hamilton. The entire mission was a setup. There was no Julia Hamilton. The Admiral manipulated me into leading an unauthorized extraction because he needed someone to access those terminals. Hamilton's composed exterior finally cracked. You have no idea what you're talking about, Commander. The Blackbird devices are still out there, 30 tactical nuclear weapons hidden around the world. If they fall into the wrong hands— Whose hands are the right ones, Admiral? Elena interrupted. Yours, the Russians. Some shadow division within our own military that operates without oversight or accountability. The ship's communication system suddenly crackled to life. USS Defender, this is Captain Petrov. I grow impatient. You have 10 minutes to deliver Commander Blackwood, or we will deploy countermeasures that will render your vessel inoperable. Mitchell moved to Elena's side. We need options, Commander. Elena studied the tactical display, mind racing through scenarios with the precision that had once made her legendary. They have an electromagnetic pulse weapon that will disable all our electronic systems. Once we're dead in the water, they'll board us. Can we outrun them? Mitchell asked. Not with a submarine blocking our path, and not without risking open warfare. Elena's eyes narrowed, focusing on the submarine's position. But there's another option. She moved to the tactical station, hands flying across the controls. Lieutenant Hawkins, do we still have drone capability? Yes, Commander. 2 MQ-8C fire scouts are prepped and ready. Launch them. Passive surveillance mode, minimum electronic signature. She turned to Mitchell. Captain, I need to speak with Colonel Morrison immediately. Mitchell nodded to a junior officer who hurried from the bridge. What are you planning? Pointing, Hamilton demanded. Elena ignored him, continuing her work at the tactical station. Lieutenant Parker, I need a full inventory of operational Tomahawks with non-standard payloads. We have 4 TLMD cruise missiles with specialized electronic warfare packages, Parker replied after checking his console. Perfect. Elena looked up as Morrison entered the bridge, his weathered face grim with determination. Colonel, you once mentioned a countermeasure to Russian EMP technology, something from your Cold War days. Morrison nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Operation Blacklight. It was a countermeasure developed specifically to neutralize Soviet pulse weapons, a focused electromagnetic shield that could be deployed around critical systems. Is it still viable? Elena asked. In theory, the schematics were classified, but Morrison's eyes flickered briefly to Hamilton. Some of us made contingency plans for technologies that were too dangerous to lose. Elena's lips curved in a grim smile. I need those schematics, Colonel, and I need them now. While Morrison worked with the engineering team to implement the Blacklight countermeasures, Elena continued developing her tactical response. The pieces of a plan were coming together, a plan as audacious as any she had executed in her Ghost Team days. They're expecting us to surrender or fight conventionally, she explained to Mitchell, her voice low as they huddled over the tactical display. We'll do neither. Instead, we'll give them exactly what they want, just not in the way they expect. Mitchell studied her face, seeing the tactical genius that had been hidden beneath the facade of a simple ordnance officer. What's your play, Commander? We're going to surrender me, Elena replied, her eyes never leaving the display. But on our terms. In the weapons bay, Elena worked swiftly alongside Morrison and a select team of engineers. They had converted one of the Fire Scout drones into a delivery system for the Blacklight countermeasure, a technological ghost from the Cold War brought back to life through Morrison's detailed memory and Elena's tactical adaptation. This should create a focused electromagnetic field around our critical systems, Morrison explained, making final adjustments to the makeshift device. When they deploy their EMP weapon, our shield will absorb the pulse and redirect it. How confident are you, Xiao? Elena asked, her hands steady as she wired the drone's control systems. Morrison's weathered face creased in a grim smile. About 60%, but that's 60% better odds than we had an hour ago. On the other side of the bay, Lieutenant Parker supervised the modification of a Tomahawk missile, replacing its standard warhead with a specialized package designed to emit a concentrated burst of electromagnetic energy. If this works, Elena said quietly to Morrison, it will neutralize their EMP capability and give us a fighting chance. And if it doesn't, the old colonel asked. Elena met his gaze steadily. Then at least we'll go down fighting instead of surrendering to people who betrayed everything we swore to protect. Morrison nodded understanding. You know Hamilton won't stop. Even if we survive this, he and his shadow division will keep coming after you. Let them come, Elena replied, her voice hardening with resolve. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding who I am and what I'm capable of. The ship's intercom interrupted their conversation. Commander Blackwood to the bridge. The Russians are demanding a response. Elena finished her work, then straightened, exchanging a meaningful glance with Morrison. Deploy the countermeasures the moment you detect their EMP signature, she instructed. Everything depends on your timing. I won't let you down, Commander, Morrison promised, just like you never let down your team. Elena paused at the door, looking back at the man who had been her silent ally for the past 6 months. When this is over, Colonel, we're going to have a long conversation about all the things you've been keeping from me. Morrison's lips quirked in a half smile. Looking forward to it, Commander. Just make sure there is an after for both of us. On the bridge, the atmosphere was charged with tension as Elena entered. The tactical display showed the Russian vessels had tightened their formation, closing the noose around the USS Defender. They've issued their final warning, Mitchell informed her. 2 minutes until they deploy their EMP weapon. Hamilton and Wallace stood to one side, their authority temporarily suspended, but their presence a constant reminder of the internal threat. Open a channel to Captain Petrov, Elena ordered, moving to the command position. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Petrov's cold, calculating gaze. Commander Blackwood, have you decided to be reasonable? Elena stood tall, her bearing that of a commander rather than a subordinate. I will surrender myself to your custody under specific conditions, Captain Petrov. Petrov's eyebrow arched in surprise. You are hardly in a position to dictate terms, Commander. On the contrary, Elena replied evenly, you want what's in my head, the Blackbird codes. Damaging this ship or killing me would defeat your purpose. And your conditions? Petrov asked, curiosity evident in his tone. I will transfer to your vessel in one of our launches. No boarding party, no additional personnel. Elena's voice remained steady, betraying none of the calculated risks she was taking. In return, you will withdraw your vessels from proximity to the USS Defender and guarantee its safe passage. Petrov studied her, weighing her proposal. And why would you suddenly decide to cooperate after 7 years of resistance? Elena's eyes hardened. Because I've learned that the people I've been protecting don't deserve my loyalty. She glanced meaningfully at Hamilton. I'd rather deal with an honest enemy than a duplicitous friend. Hamilton stepped forward, face flushed with anger. This is treasonous, Commander. Captain Mitchell. Place her under arrest immediately. Mitchell remained impassive. Commander Blackwood has full tactical authority on my order, Admiral. If her strategy involves personal risk to save this ship and crew, that's her call to make. Petrov watched this exchange with evident amusement. Internal discord in the American command structure. How unexpected. His eyes returned to Elena. Very well, Commander. I accept your terms. You have 15 minutes to board your launch. Any sign of deception, and I will not hesitate to disable your vessel. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in tense silence. You can't seriously be planning to surrender yourself, Mitchell said quietly to Elena. Trust me, Captain, she replied, her voice equally low. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Hamilton moved toward them, his authority momentarily reasserted by the sheer force of his personality. Whatever you're planning, Commander, it won't work. Petrov is not a man to be underestimated. Neither am I, Admiral, Elena replied coldly. Something you seem to have forgotten. She turned to Mitchell. Captain, I need to prepare for transfer. Lieutenant Hawkins continue monitoring Russian communications. Alert me to any changes in their positions or electronic emissions. As Elena moved toward the exit, Hamilton called after her. The Blackbird codes are more important than any single life, Commander, even yours. Those weapons must be secured before they fall into the wrong hands. Elena paused, looking back at the man who had manipulated her career, her life for 7 years. The weapons are already in the wrong hands, Admiral. They have been since 1991. In her quarters, Elena changed into her formal service uniform, the insignia of her true rank gleaming on her collar. Whatever happened next, she would face it as Commander Elena Blackwood, not as the shadow she had been forced to become. She opened the locked footlocker that had remained untouched for 6 months, removing a small encrypted device, a Ghost Team emergency beacon designed to transmit a specific signature through almost any jamming technology. As she secured it beneath her uniform, a soft knock sounded at her door. Enter, she called, expecting Morrison or Mitchell. Instead, Lieutenant Parker stepped in, his expression a mixture of determination and shame. The young officer who had once mockingly called her ballast bitch now stood at attention, unable to meet her eyes. Commander, he began, his voice faltering slightly. I need to apologize for my behavior these past months. Elena studied him, seeing not just regret but genuine admiration in his bearing. We all have roles to play, Lieutenant, some more pleasant than others. It's more than that, ma'am, Parker insisted. The things I said, the way I treated you, it was unprofessional and disrespectful. I had no idea who you really were. Few people did, Elena replied. That was the point. Parker finally looked up, meeting her gaze directly. The crew is talking, ma'am, about Operation Kingfish, about what you endured, about what you're planning to do now. He straightened his shoulders. I want you to know that we're with you, all of us, whatever you need. Elena felt a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to lift. For 6 months, she had been invisible, ignored, dismissed. Now in the moment of greatest danger, she had found not just respect, but loyalty from the very people who had once looked through her. Thank you, Lieutenant, she said, her voice softening slightly. That means more than you know. Parker nodded, then hesitated. There's something else, ma'am, something I think you should know. He lowered his voice. Commander Wallace has been gathering loyal officers, people who believe Admiral Hamilton's version of events. They're preparing to take control of key systems throughout the ship. Elena absorbed this information with the calm assessment of a battlefield commander. How many? Maybe a dozen, Parker replied. Concentrated in weapons control and communications. Thank you for the warning, Lieutenant. Elena's mind was already adapting her plans to account for this new threat. Return to your station and maintain normal operations, but keep an eye on Wallace's people. Parker saluted crisply. Aye, Commander, and good luck. After he left, Elena completed her preparations, tucking a small sidearm into an ankle holster, a precaution against the most dire scenarios. She had no illusions about the dangers of what she was about to attempt. Petrov had spent 11 months trying to break her once before. He would not waste this second opportunity. But this time she was not a prisoner caught by surprise. This time she was Kingfish, and she was bringing the fight to him. The launch bay hummed with tense activity as Elena arrived. Captain Mitchell waited beside the small craft that would transport her to the Russian submarine, his expression grim but resolute. The Fire Scout drones are in position, he informed her quietly. Morrison reports the blacklight countermeasures are ready for deployment. Elena nodded, her focus absolute. And the modified Tomahawk, Armed and ready in Tube 3, Mitchell confirmed. Targeting solution locked on the submarine's communications array. Remember, timing is everything, Elena said, her voice low. Wait for my signal before launching the Tomahawk. If we strike too soon, Petrov will know it's a trap. Mitchell studied her face. You're really going through with this? I have to, she replied simply. It's the only way to get close enough to their EMP weapon to neutralize it. And if something goes wrong, Mitchell asked, the concern evident in his tone. Elena's lips curved in a slight smile. Then I'll improvise. It's what ghost teams do best. A commotion at the bay entrance drew their attention. Admiral Hamilton approached, flanked by Commander Wallace and two armed security officers, Wallace's loyalists, judging by their expressions. Captain Mitchell, Hamilton called, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. This charade has gone far enough. I am resuming direct command of this vessel, effective immediately. Mitchell stood his ground. On what grounds, Admiral? On the grounds that you and Commander Blackwood are compromised, Hamilton replied coldly. Your judgment is impaired by emotional considerations rather than strategic necessity. Wallace stepped forward, hand resting on his sidearm. Stand down, Captain. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The launch bay had become another silent battlefield, the lines of authority and loyalty drawn in invisible but unmistakable lines. Elena assessed the situation with the cool detachment that had kept her alive through countless operations. Hamilton was making his move now before she could implement her plan. If he succeeded in retaking command, everything would be lost. Admiral Hamilton, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Before you take this irrevocable step, there's something you should know about the Blackbird codes. Hamilton's eyes narrowed with suspicion. What about them? I remember them, Elena said simply. Not consciously, not completely, but enough. Fragments that have surfaced over the years, sequences of numbers and letters that made no sense until now. It was a calculated risk, a bluff designed to leverage Hamilton's obsession with the Blackbird project. You're lying, Hamilton said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Elena countered. 11 months of Petrov's interrogation techniques had an unexpected side effect. Memory fragments, flashbacks, pieces of information rising to the surface under extreme stress. She paused deliberately, like the stress of this moment. Hamilton studied her, weighing her claim against his desperate need for those codes. What are you proposing, Commander? Let me proceed with the transfer to Petrov's vessel, Elena replied. But instead of fighting against me, work with me. Between what I remember and what you know about Blackbird, we might actually have a chance of securing those weapons. It was a masterful deception, appealing to Hamilton's mission while advancing her own. The Admiral's hesitation showed her words had found their mark. How do I know you won't simply give the codes to Petrov? Hamilton demanded. Elena's expression hardened. Because despite everything, Admiral, I'm still an American officer. Those weapons belong in American hands, just not yours alone. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Hamilton finally nodded. Very well, Commander. Proceed with the transfer, but Wallace and his team will maintain control of the weapon systems as insurance against any misunderstandings. Mitchell began to protest, but Elena silenced him with a subtle gesture. Agreed, Admiral, but Captain Mitchell retains command of the vessel itself. It was a compromise that gave her what she needed most, the opportunity to proceed with her plan. Hamilton nodded curtly. Be aware, Commander, that if you attempt to betray us, Wallace has authorization to use whatever force is necessary. I would expect nothing less, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the implicit threat. As Hamilton and Wallace withdrew with their security detail, Mitchell turned to Elena, concern evident in his expression. You don't actually remember those codes, do you? No, she admitted quietly, but Hamilton's desperation makes him vulnerable to hope. We needed to buy time, and now we have it. Mitchell's admiration was evident in his gaze. You're one hell of a tactician, Commander. Save your compliments for when we've survived this, Captain, Elena replied, though a ghost of a smile touched her lips. The real battle is just beginning. The small launch cut through the dark waters, carrying Elena toward the looming bulk of the Russian submarine. She sat alone at the controls, her mind focused on the complex sequence of events that would need to unfold with perfect timing if her plan was to succeed. Above, the modified Fire Scout drones maintained their patrol pattern virtually invisible against the night sky. Beneath her uniform, the Ghost Team beacon emitted its silent signature, a signal that would activate the moment it detected the specific electromagnetic frequency of Petrov's EMP weapon. As the launch approached the submarine, a hatch opened in its massive hull. Two Russian sailors appeared gesturing for her to bring the craft alongside a small boarding platform. Elena maneuvered with deliberate precision, bringing the launch to a perfect stop beside the submarine. The moment of truth had arrived. She stepped from the launch onto the platform, immediately flanked by armed Russian sailors who escorted her into the belly of the vessel. The hatch sealed behind her with ominous finality. Inside the submarine's interior was a maze of narrow corridors and cramped compartments filled with the distinctive sounds and smells of a vessel designed for stealth rather than comfort. The sailors led her to what appeared to be a command briefing room where Captain Petrov waited. He stood as she entered, a thin smile playing across his scarred face. "Commander Blackwood, how unexpected to have you as my guest rather than my prisoner this time." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, Captain. We both know why I'm here." Petrov gestured to a chair across from him. "Please sit, we have much to discuss." He dismissed the guards with a curt nod, leaving them alone in the small compartment. "Your surrender was quite the surprise," Petrov continued once they were alone. "After 11 months of resistance to suddenly volunteer, it makes one suspicious." "Circumstances change," Elena replied evenly. "So do allegiances." "Ah, yes. You're Admiral Hamilton." Petrov's smile widened slightly. "A most pragmatic man, wouldn't you agree?" Elena maintained her composed exterior while her mind remained hyper-alert, counting down the minutes, analyzing every detail of her surroundings. The submarine systems, the positioning of guards, the most likely location of the EMP weapon. "Hamilton has his own agenda," she said carefully, "one that no longer aligns with mine." "And what is your agenda, Commander?" Petrov asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Elena met his gaze directly. "Survival, justice, perhaps a bit of vengeance." Petrov laughed, a surprisingly genuine sound. "You Americans always so dramatic. In Russia, we are more pragmatic. Information is simply a commodity to be traded. No need for grand motivations." "Is that what I am to you, a commodity?" Elena asked. "A valuable one," Petrov confirmed. "The information in your mind, the Blackbird access codes, is worth more than gold in certain markets." "And who exactly is your market captain?" Elena pressed, fishing for confirmation of what Morrison had told her. "Because I don't think you're working for the Russian government any more than Hamilton is working for the American one." Petrov studied her with newfound respect. "You've become more perceptive since our last encounter, Commander." "You're right, of course. National allegiances are so limiting. There are private interests with far greater resources and fewer bureaucratic constraints." "The Shadow Division," Elena concluded, "a private military organization with operatives embedded in multiple governments." "Very good," Petrov nodded, "though we prefer the term Strategic Continuity Group. More professional, less dramatic." The pieces were falling into place, the final confirmation of the conspiracy Morrison had outlined. A private organization with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of multiple governments, seeking control of the most destructive weapons ever developed. "And the Blackbird devices are just the beginning, aren't they?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "They are the key," Petrov corrected. "Cold War relics, yes, but with access codes that unlock something far more valuable: control protocols for next-generation autonomous weapons systems. Systems that can operate without human oversight or intervention." Elena kept him talking, each second bringing her closer to the moment when her plan would activate. "And Hamilton, what's his role in all this?" "Is insurance," Petrov replied simply. "A highly placed American admiral provides certain protections, just as I provide access to Russian military assets when needed." "A perfect arrangement," Elena observed, "until someone like me disrupts it." Petrov's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, well, that disruption ends today." He pressed a button on the table between them. "Dr. Ivanov, please join us. Our guest is ready for the procedure." A side door opened to admit a thin, bespectacled man in a lab coat carrying what appeared to be a specialized medical case. Elena recognized the type of equipment immediately, neurological extraction technology far more advanced than what had been used on her 7 years ago. The procedure is quite refined now, Petrov explained conversationally, much less invasive than our previous methods. You'll be conscious throughout but unable to resist the cognitive probes. The information will be extracted whether you cooperate or not. Elena maintained her calm exterior while inwardly counting down. 3 minutes until Morrison would activate the blacklight countermeasures. 4 minutes until Mitchell would launch the modified Tomahawk. Everything depended on her keeping Petrov engaged until then. Before we begin, she said carefully, I have a question, Captain, a professional curiosity, if you will. Petrov gestured magnanimously. Your last request as a free mind. I can grant that. The EMP weapon you threatened the defender with, Elena began. Is it the Svarog 7 prototype, the one developed by the GRU's Special Technologies Division? Surprise flickered across Petrov's face before he could suppress it. You are well informed, Commander. Yes, the Svarog 7, capable of disabling all electronic systems within a half-kilometer radius without causing physical damage. Quite the technological marvel. And where is it deployed? Elena asked, pushing her advantage. On this vessel, Petrov smiled thinly. Nice try, Commander, but its location is not something you need to know for our procedure. The doctor had finished setting up his equipment, a disturbing array of neural interfaces and monitoring devices. We are ready, Captain, he announced. Excellent, Petrov replied, then turned back to Elena. No more delays, Commander. It's time to finally unlock the secrets that you've been carrying all these years. As the doctor approached with a neural probe, Elena made her move. The Ghost Team beacon beneath her uniform had been silently mapping the submarine's electronic emissions, pinpointing the distinctive signature of the Svarog 7 device. With practiced precision, she activated the beacon's secondary function, a focused electromagnetic pulse, designed to trigger the blacklight countermeasures aboard the USS Defender. The effect was immediate. Alarms blared throughout the submarine as its sensors detected the pulse. Petrov's eyes widened in sudden understanding. What have you done? He demanded, reaching for a communication panel. Created a distraction, Elena replied, moving with the fluid speed that had once made her Ghost Team legendary. Before either Petrov or the doctor could react, she had flipped the heavy table between them, sending equipment crashing to the floor. In the same motion, she retrieved the sidearm from her ankle holster, leveling it at Petrov. Don't move, Captain, she ordered, her voice deadly calm. Your EMP weapon has been neutralized, and a modified Tomahawk is currently locked onto this vessel's communication array. Petrov's composure cracked fury, replacing his usual calculated demeanor. You're bluffing. No one could neutralize the Svarog 7 that quickly. Colonel Morrison sends his regards, Elena replied. He always was fond of Cold War countermeasures. Understanding dawned in Petrov's eyes. Blacklight, he whispered. That program was terminated decades ago. Much like Blackbird, Elena countered. Yet here we are. The submarine shuddered as something impacted nearby the modified Tomahawk, striking its target with pinpoint precision. The lights flickered, then stabilized as backup systems engaged. Your communication array has been disabled, Elena informed him. You can no longer coordinate with your surface vessels or transmit the activation signal for the Svarog 7. Petrov's hand inched toward a concealed weapon, but Elena's aim never wavered. I wouldn't, Captain. Unlike you, I don't need anyone conscious for extraction procedures. The door burst open as armed sailors responded to the alarms, weapons raised. Elena had anticipated this moment, positioning herself with her back to a bulkhead, Petrov's body between her and the new threat. Stand down, Petrov ordered his men, recognizing the precariousness of his position. The commander and I are still negotiating. The sailors hesitated, weapons still raised but not advancing. Here's the negotiation, Elena said, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of command. You will surface this vessel immediately and withdraw from proximity to the USS Defender. Your surface vessels will also withdraw to international waters. And why would I agree to these terms? Petrov asked, though the calculation in his eyes suggested he was already weighing his options. Because I've just transmitted the location of this submarine and details of your strategic continuity group to 3 separate intelligence agencies, Elena replied. If anything happens to me or the defender, that information goes public, including your private clients, financial backers, and operational protocols. It was another calculated bluff, but one supported by the evidence of the Tomahawk strike and disabled communications. Petrov would have no way to verify whether she was telling the truth. The Russian captain's eyes narrowed as he assessed her claim. You always were a formidable opponent, Commander. Not an opponent, Captain, Elena corrected. A survivor. Something you taught me to be during those 11 months. A tense silence filled the compartment as Petrov calculated his options. Finally, he nodded. Very well, Commander. We will withdraw for now. But this game is far from over. It's not a game, Elena replied coldly. And the next time you come after me or my people, I won't be as merciful. Aboard the USS Defender, the bridge erupted into controlled chaos as the Russian submarine's massive hull broke the surface less than 500 meters from their position. The Tomahawk struck its target, Hawkins reported from the tactical station. Communications array disabled. Their surface vessels are breaking formation. Mitchell watched the tactical display with tense anticipation. Any sign of Commander Blackwood? Negative, sir, Hawkins replied. No communications from the launch or the submarine. Hamilton and Wallace had returned to the bridge, their attempt to seize control of the weapon systems thwarted by Parker and a group of loyal officers. You've just initiated an act of war, Captain, Hamilton warned, firing on a Russian vessel in international waters. After they fired on us, Mitchell countered, and technically Commander Blackwood initiated it. Take it up with her if we get her back. The tactical display updated as the submarine's forward hatch opened. A small figure emerged onto the conning tower, a solitary figure in a naval uniform. Visual confirmation, Hawkins announced, relief evident in his voice. It's Commander Blackwood. The bridge crew watched as Elena made her way down to the launch craft still secured alongside the submarine. With deliberate calm, she boarded the small vessel and detached from the submarine's hull. Russian vessels are withdrawing, Hawkins reported, studying the tactical display. All three surface ships are changing course. The submarine is beginning to submerge. Mitchell allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Maintain defensive posture until Commander Blackwood is safely aboard and all Russian vessels are beyond visual range. Hamilton's face was a mask of barely contained fury. This isn't over, Captain. Commander Blackwood has compromised a classified operation of vital national security. No, Admiral, Mitchell replied evenly. You compromised it when you decided to place your shadow organization's agenda above your oath to this country. The launch approached, the USS Defender, Elena's solitary figure visible at the controls. As the small craft docked with the destroyer, Mitchell ordered a security detail to escort her safely to the bridge, not as a precaution against her, but as protection from Hamilton and Wallace's remaining loyalists. When Elena finally stepped onto the bridge, the crew rose in spontaneous respect. The woman who had loaded missiles in obscurity for 6 months had returned as the commander she had always been, her bearing regal, her authority unquestioned. Mission accomplished, Captain, she reported formally. The Russian forces are withdrawing and their EMP weapon has been neutralized. Well done, Commander, Mitchell replied with equal formality, though his eyes conveyed much more. Welcome back. Elena turned to face Hamilton, her expression betraying none of the complex emotions that must have been churning beneath her professional exterior. Admiral Hamilton, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge, Captain Petrov sends his regards. He also confirmed your involvement with the Strategic Continuity Group, a private military organization seeking control of the Blackbird devices and the next-generation weapons systems they can access. Hamilton's face hardened. You have no idea what you are interfering with, Commander. Those weapons must be controlled by people who understand the greater strategic picture, people who can make the hard decisions without political interference. People like you, Elena asked quietly, who sacrifice ghost teams and manipulate loyal officers to pursue their private agenda? She shook her head. That's not strategy, Admiral. That's treason. Hamilton straightened, attempting to reassert his authority through sheer force of will. This is far from over, Commander. When we return to port, Elena interrupted, you will face a board of inquiry regarding your unauthorized manipulation of Operation Kingfish, your collaboration with foreign operatives, and your involvement with a shadow organization operating outside the chain of command. She turned to Mitchell. Captain, I recommend that Admiral Hamilton and Commander Wallace be confined to quarters under guard until we can transfer them to appropriate authorities. Mitchell nodded. I concur, Commander. He gestured to the security detail. Escort the Admiral and Commander Wallace to secured quarters. Post guards at all times. As Hamilton was led from the bridge, he paused beside Elena. You still don't understand what's at stake, he said, his voice low and intense. The Blackbird devices are out there, Commander. And now, without proper control, they're more dangerous than ever. They were always dangerous, Elena replied, especially in the hands of people who believe they're above the law. After Hamilton and Wallace had been removed, Mitchell turned to Elena. What really happened on that submarine, Commander? Elena's expression softened slightly. Let's just say Captain Petrov and I reached an understanding. He now knows the cost of coming after me or this ship again. Morrison, who had joined them on the bridge, nodded with approval. The Ghost Commander strikes again. Elena looked around at the bridge crewmen and women who had ignored her for months now, watching her with undisguised respect and admiration. The transformation was complete from shadow to commander, from invisible to essential. Captain, she said, turning back to Mitchell, request permission to resume duties as tactical executive officer. Mitchell smiled. Permission granted, Commander, though I think we might need to make that position permanent when we return to port. One step at a time, Captain, Elena replied, though for the first time in 7 years, a genuine smile touched her lips. We still have a ship to run. 2 weeks later, the USS Defender docked at Naval Station Norfolk, its return marked by an unusual reception committee, senior officers from Naval Intelligence, the Joint Chiefs, and even a representative from the Secretary of Defense. The debriefings had been intense and exhaustive. Elena had spent days recounting every detail of Operation Kingfish, her captivity, and the recent confrontation with Petrov's forces. Hamilton and Wallace had been transferred to secure facilities pending investigations that would likely span years and reach into the highest levels of military command. On her final day aboard, Elena stood on the observation deck, watching the activities of the busy port. The weight of the past 7 years seemed to have lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet determination to face whatever came next. Morrison found her there, approaching with the relaxed confidence of someone who had seen too much to be intimidated by uncertainty. The Joint Chiefs have reviewed your case, he informed her without preamble. Operation Kingfish has been officially reclassified as a successful extraction under hostile conditions. Your actions have been deemed in keeping with the highest traditions of naval service. Elena's expression remained carefully neutral. And my team, the operators who died because of Hamilton's manipulation. Posthumous commendations, Morrison replied. Their families will be notified of their heroism, though the details will remain classified. Better than nothing, Elena acknowledged. And Hamilton, Morrison's weathered face hardened, cooperating after a fashion. His testimony has already led to the identification of 3 other members of the Strategic Continuity Group within Naval Command. But the organization is vast, embedded in multiple governments, private corporations, intelligence agencies. And the Blackbird devices, Elena asked the question that had driven so much of the past 7 years. Still out there, Morrison admitted, but now we know who's looking for them and why. That gives us an advantage we didn't have before. Elena nodded, absorbing this information with the tactical assessment that had become second nature. What happens now, Colonel, to me, I mean? Morrison smiled slightly. That depends on you, Commander. There's a ghost team being assembled, elite operators tasked with tracking down the remaining Blackbird devices before the Strategic Continuity Group can find them. And they need a commander, Elena concluded. They need Kingfish, Morrison corrected. Someone who understands the stakes, who knows the players, who can operate in the shadows when necessary and in the light when possible. Elena turned to face the horizon, considering the offer. For 7 years, she had lived in the shadows, buried beneath the weight of a mission gone wrong and a sacrifice unrecognized. Now she was being offered a chance to step back into the light, to reclaim not just her rank, but her purpose. When do we start? She asked, decision made. Morrison's smile widened. We already have. Welcome back, Commander Blackwood. As they walked together toward the waiting transport, Elena passed a group of junior officers from the Defender, including Lieutenant Parker, who snapped to attention as she approached. Commander, he acknowledged, offering a crisp salute. Elena returned the salute with equal precision. "Lieutenant, take care of our ship." "Yes, ma'am," Parker replied, then hesitated. "It was an honor serving with you, Commander, even when, even when we didn't know who you really were." "Sometimes the greatest honor comes from doing your duty when no one is watching, Lieutenant," Elena replied. "Remember that." As she continued toward the transport, Elena felt the eyes of the crew following her, no longer looking through her, but truly seeing her for the first time. The woman who had loaded missiles in obscurity had reclaimed her rightful place not just as a commander, but as the tactical legend she had always been. The scars on her back remained a permanent reminder of sacrifice and survival, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, the story of Commander Elena Blackwood, the Ghost Commander, who had emerged from the shadows to reclaim her honor and her purpose. Ahead lay new missions, new challenges, new battles against an enemy that operated in the darkest corners of power. But she would face them as herself, not as a shadow, not as a ghost, but as the commander she had always been. The sun glinted off her commander's insignia as she boarded the transport, leaving behind the ship that had been both her prison and her salvation. Whatever came next, Elena Blackwood was ready. Some heroes remain in shadow by choice, carrying burdens, so others don't have to. But sometimes those shadows lift, revealing the strength that was always there waiting to be recognized.